The bottom line of astrology is understanding and appreciating and applauding and supporting the human being. These planets are guides. Solar arc is magic, and it's been so for thousands of years. Our objective is not the multiplicity of measurements, but the assimilation of key measurements. I call them the big bells. Big time, big loud bells ring in our lives when we have solar arcs involving the sun, the moon, or an angle. The planets are guidelines to us to help us learn about life. The fear of counseling is our lack of confidence that we have anything significant to say. We must be practical more than we must be exact in order to be enrichingly engaged in the progress and development of your client. We're going to explore rectification as a process, not to be correct, but to be valid. You're close to a miracle in divining the birth time. All of this is a hunt, an exciting, challenging hunt. This is where everything you know about astrology and life, everything comes to play. You will be quite knowing about it all. And I welcome you to this circle of understanding. And we as astrologers are privileged to know how to find the portrait among the planets. There's a very old joke that can help us introduce the subject of this DVD. Two psychiatrists are passing each other on the sidewalk. One gruffly and with great resistance says, "Good morning." And the other one goes past and says to himself, "I wonder what he meant by that." Now, this is overdoing analytical thinking. But in astrology, there has not been enough analytical thinking brought into our style of conducting consultations, our understanding of what consultations are for, and where we can take them. So many people have come to me in my travels and said, I don't know really what to say to the client to be helpful. I don't have a degree in psychology from a university. I say, well, how many books have you read that are written by psychiatrists, psychologists? How many self-help books have you internalized and understood and discussed with other people? That's the answer. The fear of counseling is our lack of preparedness, our lack of confidence that we have anything significant to say. Therapeutic, helpful counseling has little to do with giving advice. There's a big trap when you say or think, if I were you, I would. I mean, who are we to pontificate like that? The answer is not with the planets. People do things. Planets don't. The planets are guidelines to us to help us learn about life. I would suggest that our fear in counseling is a lack of learning, a lack of polish. The first thing we have to do is to eliminate jargon. Not mention one single word of astrology because it's off the track. Your client does not understand one word of astrology. And even if he or she does and is an avid student, it will get in the way. You've got to make sense in human terms. If you remove jargon, just think how much time and space are left to say something significant. It's a defense mechanism. Get rid of it, please. If we know what we don't know, we can establish a reading and study program to enrich ourselves. I don't know anything about advanced finance, and I don't want to know anything about advanced finance. And when I have advanced financial people call me, I warn them that I'm going to talk about them as human beings, not as colleagues in advanced finance. You see my point? The bottom line of astrology is understanding and appreciating and applauding and supporting the human being. And we do this by inspecting and adjusting a frame of mind. What is the client's frame of mind to begin with? Why is it so? Where did it come from? What behaviors and thought processes have been inherited? What has become habitual that is getting in the way? What can be adjusted for efficiency and fulfillment? I think that's rather interesting, because understanding this is not difficult if we decide to pursue it. Now, you remember in the early part of this series of DVDs, we talked about the all-important observation of hemisphere emphasis. We saw that when a hemisphere is emphasized clearly by the pattern of retrogradation in the opposite hemisphere, and many other things that we went over in the early DVDs. This emphasis of hemisphere tells us an enormous amount about the life being lived the way it is. We know that if the orientation is to the east natally, it suggests defensiveness or self-withdrawal. There simply is no doubt about that. Now, in studying this and doing thousands and thousands of horoscopes, I realized that in the infinite symmetry, beauty of nature, the therapy flow is in the opposite hemisphere. To achieve balance, to get out there and adjust things, and in the process enrich one's life. So, if the hemisphere emphasis analytically is to the east, suggesting a lot of defensiveness, self-withdrawal, the therapy flow would really be to the west. And this sense of therapy flow should infiltrate and color our thoughts and our way of speaking and the vectors of our behavioral development. For example, breaking defensive habits. Do you know how much energy is used up in being defensive? Wow. And when you point it out that way, the client might say to you, "Oh, you're absolutely right. Maybe that's why I'm so damn tired at the end of every day." It's true. What we need to do is create acceptance for the client. What's holding back successful relationships? A seventh house orientated focal point. What is it that, from the defensive posture, is making it difficult to open it up and create acceptance in relationships? I know that's a mighty big question, but that's the question, isn't it? And no planet in its realms is going to solve that question. What will solve that question is appreciating why defensiveness has become the habit, the norm. Getting some distance in the understanding and applying a fresh view of self within relationships. We're adjusting the frame of mind. Now, what if the basic orientation is emphasized to the West, suggesting a giving of the self to others, giving it away to people, being assumed, even undervalued? Take me, I'm yours, for the asking. I want to help you. Abuse me. Use me up. How many people are ensnared within this posture of life development to caring for aged parents for such a long time they grow to hate them? They sacrifice their own relationships. They can't get off the ground because they're being used up by orientation to other people's needs. And this is an extension often of parental habits in bringing the child up. And they say, well, you owe it to us to sacrifice your life for us. Now, I'm overstating it. Of course I am. Although I have seen cases like that. But you must understand that these vectors of development are essential. They're clear, and they do function this way. The Western orientation is dangerous. It hurts our feelings about being lovable. This is why we work so hard to get appreciation from other people, dedicating ourselves to them so that they, in turn, will give us love. When we have an 11th house ruler under high developmental tension and we have a Western orientation, we have to understand that that process is working itself out. It won't be as necessarily as extreme as I'm painting it in vivid notation, but it will be strong and clear and recognizable by the client. We're trying to establish self-worth, the ruler of the second house, the ruler of the 11th, feeling lovable by doing things to excess for other people. And we forget the art of selfishness. So if all of that is taking place with this emphasis to the West, therapy flow should come back to the East. And that therapy flow is a return to self issues, adjusting personal values, personal reward recognition. Very strong stuff. If the horoscope is clearly orientated to the north, below the horizon, the suggestion is that there's a lot of unfinished business in the early home. There's no doubt about it. There's an insecurity. There's not any anchor that is sure, informative, supportive values. And so what we want to do is pay attention therapeutically to the southern hemisphere above the horizon. That is the therapy flow over compensatorily. We would want to create distance from the early home experience. Creating distance is great. It's not just avoiding it, the habit of learned responses that are debilitating. It's really and truly sometimes just getting out of Dodge, you know? It's always worse around the holidays when the family gets together and relives these things. And you can't wait to get rid of it. Distance. Objectification. Arrange to believe the commendation you can earn from your work. How many people with unfinished business in the early home have never really been reinforced, supported, complimented, pat on the back, honored by the parental environment? And so they go out and try to do a good job and don't believe that they can. They don't believe the raise they get. And then finally the raises stop coming. The applause stops sounding. And people just forget that they are highly capable. They don't want to believe a compliment. And we all know people who cannot accept a compliment. Now the therapy flow has to change that. The therapy flow to the south must accept recognition and confidence to establish distance from that which is below the horizon, that which has been problematic, that which has become routinized and difficult. I hope you're accepting what I'm saying as significant. And if you have to work through one of these hemisphere emphasis orientations yourself, all the more reason that you can be enrichingly strong with your client. If the orientation is south, above the horizon, natally, it suggests, and I know this is a painful word, victimization. Being pushed around, taken advantage of. Hard to deny that, although the word victimization is very uncomfortable to use. You can say to your client, you know, the orientation in this horoscope suggests strongly that in the swirl of activity in the world, you get pushed around a lot. And I would smile a little bit, I'd shake my head, yes, and you will get that sympathetic door open response from your client. You know something, and they are being honest with you because they respect what you know. Being pushed around a lot, even to the point, and come forward in your chair caringly, even to the point of being victimized. Well, you're going to get a response. And I'm telling you, this is wise, profound insight, so easily accomplished through looking at the horoscope for hemisphere emphasis. It works. Then it's knowing how to talk about it. And I'm trying to give you examples of that throughout this DVD. You soften your voice, but you preserve its intelligence. The therapy flow for a southern emphasis is going to be back to the north to establish a secure home. Isn't it wonderful? You can get pushed around at work all day, but if you can go home to a loving family and a loving home life, somehow the wounds are less. That's what I mean. There has to be a secure, supportive feel about the private life. Who offers credible emotional safety in your life? Interesting. Who offers credible emotional safety in your life? There are times in my life where I simply must acknowledge that I am extremely eager to be sure of credible emotional support in my private life. And that's because I give so much away, I guess, in helping others with a Western orientation in my horoscope. And these hemisphere emphases and therapy flow situations, when you understand them, can be divided in quadrants as well. You can have a north-east emphasis, which is the quadrant of houses 1, 2, and 3. It may be a vicious parental inadequacy and sibling rivalry that causes a defensive posture in you as you grow into adulthood. To solve these problems, you perhaps marry your spouse, mother or father, to try to get another round of activity going through which you will be rewarded rather than demoralized. And I mean, I am not a pessimistic man, and I am not reading pessimism into this. I am reflecting realities that must be discussed to one degree or another in order to be enrichingly engaged in the progress and development of your client. If you're talking about a client activity, for example, guided by Saturn in the 4th house, and you're talking about liking antiques, we've got a problem. It's got to be deeper than that. It's got to see a parental figure grounded in depth in the habits of our being. What is the modeling dimension of our parents for us if we have a difficult emphasis to the area below the horizon, to the north? What is that? Were we being raised by our parents for what we need? Or were they seeing us as what they want us to be? Whoa, very difficult. What do we see between our parents about man and woman, husband and wife, wife-husband? Are we afraid to become like them? Remember, since we're in the womb, our parents have designed for us how they want us to be. As soon as we're born, oh, you look just like your father, or you are just like your mother. On a bad day, my mother, when I was 10 or 11, was saying, now don't you behave the way your father did, and he was long gone. Now how am I supposed to know how my father behaved? But she was making her point. Sometimes when parents make points, they hurt their children. And that has to be clear. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about me and you. I'm talking about life. And I'm helping you with the fear of counseling because I'm showing you a learning curve of where to go to find out things, a reading program to fill the gaps, to help you adjust the frame of mind in your clients. Makes sense, doesn't it? These vulnerabilities of hemisphere emphasis, these vulnerabilities are very real. And as soon as you share this knowledge with your client, you're showing the client how much you know about life. And isn't the client fortunate to be with you? And if your own problems tend to get in the way, you just have to sidestep it. It's not about you. It's about giving your client strength. I had a client come to see me just last week. No, 10 days ago. And I paid him a compliment, strategically, very early in the consultation. And he just could not take it. And I was most sincere, and I saw this happening across my desk with his body, and he was going down like this. And I reached out for a Kleenex with one hand, and I reached out with my other hand to touch his hand on the desk to make contact. And I said, "Is this the first compliment you've ever heard in your life?" But I said it softly. And he just opened up, and he was flushed with tears. How much did I have to do to get that information revealed? Huh? I was relating to him the way his parents should have related to him. Fascinating. He was so vulnerable to being deceived. Deception was all around him when he was growing up. His brother was preferred by the parents openly. You know, he tried very, very hard. He was a very handsome guy, and he gets into a lot of trouble, and he has a lot of children out of wedlock with girls, and all of that. And it all came down with his not being able to believe in himself, do constructive work for others, be proud of it, because he was never supported in those needs and wishes that he has. Okay. Please know that when you see the sun and moon in square in the horoscope, in your aspect grid, say within 2.5 degrees, the chances are very high that the parents were at each other's throats when the child was born, when your client was born. And so you say to your client, you know, there's a suggestion here in the horoscope. Don't say, the horoscope says. Please, ameliorate that, soften it. Using the verb suggests, or a suggestion, the noun, allows your client to adjust nuance. It's only humanistically fair. There's a suggestion in your horoscope that your parents were having a difficult time when you were born. Maybe they were at each other's throats. And he'll say, or she'll say, yes, they were. And you say, how do you know? Because the answer to that question is very revealing, because it will be that one of the parents has used the situation punitively with the child when the child is growing up. The mother said, we tried to abort you. I kid you not. Or the big sister will say, you know, they didn't want you when you were born. I remember. Oh. Now, a child does not navigate life alone. It needs the stepping stones across many a stream. It needs the parental embrace, the touchy-feely, soft awarenesses of love. When you have a situation in the horoscope where you have Pluto in high tension with the moon, or the nodal axis is highly configurated with a natal planet, or the ruler of the fourth is under high developmental tension. All of these three are signaling attention upon the mother or mother figure. And you can say, the mother seems to be everywhere here. Notice the construction of that observation. The mother seems to be everywhere here. Here in the horoscope, not you. See my point? You're going to get an answer like, she sure was. You say, tell me how. And then you listen with all the creativity of that one psychiatrist passing the other on the sidewalk. What did she mean by that? Tell me. Listen to the values being expressed to you. Where did your mother learn that behavior? Oh, your mind is telling you it from her mother. And so it goes. When you have Pluto in hard aspect with the sun, you're going to have a certain amount of suppression. Find out about it. There's a suggestion here in the horoscope of a lot of suppression in the early home life. You say that to Prince Charles, who has Pluto square his sun, and he's going to say, this is absolutely amazing, it's brilliant. You're absolutely right. Suppressed all my life. And then you're going to see in Prince Charles's horoscope that the moon is on the nodal axis, in the parental axis, and you'll say, and that comes from mother, doesn't it? Oh, absolutely, you're brilliant. And then you can have a nice conversation. These measurements are very reliable. When I discovered them some years ago, I started to test them throughout the world, some 26 countries. All the people in my master's certification course practice them. And I hear the reports. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of corroborations. And I'm showing you simple ways to articulate them to open a world of empathy with your client. What about Sun with Venus, Sun with Mercury, Mercury with Venus, or all three together? I suggest to you that this is idealism. And I suggest that idealism is a major defense mechanism. We create idealism when we want to improve the condition we see around ourselves and within ourselves. We want to say, well, I mean, God is going to take care of this, and I feel wonderful about that, And we're leaving behind the practical concerns of development that are problematic. I'm not going to enter into a discussion about idealism, but I'm going to enter into a discussion about the role it plays with my client. And I'll say, you know, there's a tremendous amount of idealism here in this horoscope. Not in you, I didn't say that, in this horoscope. And the person will say, yes, there really is. You can go to the bank on that. Wow, is there? Woo! All that kind of reaction. And you say, how does it get in the way? Not why, necessarily, but how does it get in the way? This is called an assumptive question. You're assuming it gets in the way. And I urge you to assume it, because it's very hard to make idealism sing. And when Jupiter or Neptune are involved, it's even harder, because then that suggests a religious rationalization for it all. People who feel that they're unlovable feel unlovable because the father or the mother, especially the father, didn't have time or talent to identify with that side of the individuals growing up. Saturn retrograde phenomenology is indispensable. Father taken out of the picture early, or there and passive, or so tyrannical so as not to have given the guidance of authoritative love. And you'll hear the excuses. Oh, he was very busy. He was at work all the time. Well, that's the point. And say that Saturn just rules the 11th. It leaves you with this gigantic need for love. Keep your sentences short. Sit still. Let your eyes speak as well. What if you have 3 or more quintiles in a chart within a 2.5 degree orb? You've got to find out what the person's creative outlet is. So you say, gee, there's a suggestion here of a lot of creativity. What is your outlet for it? And a smile. If the person says, I don't have one, may I suggest to you that you say, what was it? In other words, it was stifled early on. Say, well, what was that creative outlet? And then all of a sudden, usually, you will see it well up in the client, and it will say, well, I wanted to get a clarinet scholarship to college, and I was be in the marching band, and I wanted to become a music teacher, and I really and truly did, and they wouldn't let me. What's that telling you? How's that part of the picture? Where does that fit in with hemisphere emphasis? Where are you going to take it with therapy flow? I had a case from China. A person called me up from Hong Kong. And I remember this distinctly, a very big, big father problem. You know, culturally austere, problematic to a fault. And this woman was extremely wise about it. It was extremely strong, and she said to me in English, well, yes, all the things that we're talking about, that was the situation with my father. Is it okay to say, I wish him dead? Now that's a big question, huh? And thank God I got a reply in my mind instantly. I said, if you can say that to me in Chinese, we will have our answer. She was able to talk about it in English brutally, honestly, objectively, coldly. And we had to see if she could say it in her native tongue. I think that's interesting. And you're going to find creative strokes of analytical art within you, each of you. The more you pay attention to it, and the more you practice it. Say something to your client that is moving, emotional, and listen. Recent client, having extraordinary difficulties with a neurotic husband, trying to be helpful to him. And I just asked one question. I said, how exactly is he fitting into the world? What I wanted to hear from her was how alive was his reigning need symbolized by his moon. Remember in DVD 1? I wanted to hear that he was still aware of what he wanted in life, what he needed in life. The answer I got was poor. The man is in severe neurotic trouble and is being hospitalized. But that's an interesting question, isn't it? How is he fitting into the world? He wasn't. And that's somebody else's job, to be helpful. I think above all, our conversation with the client has to be practical. It's too easy to be swamped by the idealism of your client because they're used to doing that with other people. It makes them feel good to prevail with idealistic explosions. While I respect the ingredients of idealism, I know it can't be the curtain between self and reality. And I want us astrologers, in our outreach to help others, to know that just because we have a measurement doesn't mean it's going to take effect. We have to be able to know what maximally can occur from a measurement, but the measurement doesn't mean it's going to happen or occur at the level that we think it will occur. And this is why the art of sensitive questioning is so important. It establishes the level. Everybody has the same problems to one degree or another. Everybody wants love. Everybody has been through parental battlements. Everybody has relationship problems. The horoscope signals these, and the client establishes the level. You listen to it, and you adjust. Change can only happen if your client is involved knowingly and if the environment cooperates. I was talking with this man. He was just so self-deprecating you couldn't believe it. And I listened to a little bit of it. I often cut off extreme discussions because they turn into Cracker Barrel gossip talk after a while. Very quickly, actually. So when you get the idea, you can sum it up in your mind in 2 or 3 words. I need love, or relationships stink, or something like that. I'm not being funny. I'm showing you how objective you have to be to get orientated to help. And I said to this man, "You're so hard on yourself." He said, "Well, I guess so." And I said, "You've been told this before?" He says, "Yes, I have. I even went to a psychiatrist for it. I'm really down on myself all the time." And I said, "Will you do me a favor?" Just out of the blue. Now, people want to do favors for other people. And he was delighted that I had changed the subject, so he thought. And he said, "Of course, yes, what?" I said, "I want you to go home and find the right time to sit down with your wife. Light a candle, glass of wine, maybe even tell her about this conversation, and ask her to please tell you why she loves you." Another fellow comes to mind. When he talked about his job, he was so, again, self-deprecating about his job, I couldn't stand it. I mean, he had a job. He was a large area sales director for an air conditioning firm. And he hated it. And whenever he talked about it, he hated being a salesman. And I finally got to the point where I realized probably why he hated it is because his father had been a salesman and he had inherited this type of talk from his father about it, and he was embarrassed to be in the same type of field, selling. He used to say to me, he would say to me in conversation, "You know, and then I have all these reports to do and all that garbage. And then, you know, I sent to this convention and all that garbage." And he kept referring to his work to abbreviate as garbage. Now, do we have a wrong profession or what? Can he possibly change, or is he too old? These are the thoughts that have to go through your mind. Then call it to his attention and say, it's simply unbecoming. Change or stop. And they will respect you for that, because you didn't get all caught up in it and what have you. Boom. We must be practical more than we must be exact. Please remember that, please. Very often when you're talking with your client, it is very helpful to provide an aphorism, a slogan, if you will, that they can delight in, remember, and carry with them into the future. And they do. They can't remember the entire consultation, which should not really be over an hour. Nobody can take that much. I urge you to realize they are going to remember the tone, certain vivid understandings, and the last 5 minutes. Their frame of mind in the process should be beneficially altered. Now, I urge you to go out and buy a little booklet of epithets and aphorisms. They're fun. They contain wisdom in wry ways. For instance, one here that I have a note on, now you won't have to work to stay afloat in old waters anymore, especially after a divorce is completed. Now you won't have to work to stay afloat in old waters anymore. They all smile. It's over with. But it's comfortable to look at it this way. I invent sayings, and I like doing it because it gives me a workout. And when they're very helpful to my client, I'm delighted. My favorite one I've invented is this. Let me suggest something to you. When Sir Isaac Newton, he had to walk into the garden in order for the apple to drop. Now, I use that with people who think it's just going to come out of a tree or it will come zipping down some planetary channel because the astrologer said so. In other words, you have to work at it too. Newton had to be there to see the apple fall on his head. There's often a value of the surprising question. Wow, I have used this so often. A lady at a table with 10 people who are new to her was sitting on my left. We were all getting to know each other and we're talking happily. I turned my chair and I said to the lady, "What do you do for a living?" Now, I was just trying to be nice and try to get an interesting conversation going. And she said, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And I said, why? That was startling. And out came a story that she has to care for some problematic children with autism, etc., and went on and on and on. And then finally she stopped herself because she was narrating a very difficult medical history and her responsibilities were high, high, high. And she said, and now I'm telling all of you guys. I said, you have friends. Isn't that interesting? The surprising question. I remember being at a convention, and the lady next to me, on my left again, was a very prominent astrologer from a foreign country. I didn't know who she was, but somebody told me about this. She knew who I was. And she was very nervous sitting there next to me. We were all having a glass of wine or something. It was supposed to be very relaxed. And to settle her down, I said, how many children do you have? And she said, 4. And I said, why? Now, I was being a little bit devilish to do that. I was asking this question. And out came a response about the last one not being wanted. etc. And it almost got too much. It became a therapy situation, and I was just sitting there having a glass of wine with a group of people. So it's a very powerful thing to ask why. Gently. Trust it. Try it. You'll be amazed. Everybody's going to say to you at the end of the consultation, one more thing. When will I have a relationship? You smile knowingly and saying, oh, that's a very good question, of course, but it is not going to occur for a while. You don't see it in the horoscope. There are other things to work out first. First things first. This should be your guide. You can't say, oh, you're going to be rescued on the 4th month of next year, on the 2nd Friday. There's going to be a party, you're going to meet someone, and some enchanted evening. It's not going to work that way. It just isn't. Meanwhile, this person is trying to reshape his or her life and is very busy. Plus, in the process of reshaping the life and getting the job and the reward and the recognition that is proper, this person is going to become different, giving off a different vibe, attracting a different person. That's what's coming first. Isn't that exciting? And the client will agree with you. The only reason they want to know about having a relationship, and it's a good reason, is because they are alone with fears and feelings. Point that out. It's hard to be alone at a time like this. Who can be helping you? Tell me a friend you can talk over this job hunt now that we know the right profession for you. Now that you're approaching 27. Did Saturn return transit go through your mind? Should have. It's part of the guarantee of this job redirection being at a level that's going to be pleasing for this person. Very often people will overstress their condition. They're going to say, I really feel almost suicidal. Take that with a grain of salt, perhaps, unless you know a lot about suicide and you can spot the other symptoms. What's going to happen is, as you establish a new frame of mind and perspective about this, it's going to come down to, well, yes, I just wanted to know if my life is going to improve. That's a long way from self-dramatization of suicide potential. This is requiring what I spoke of when we first started, about how important it is for us to talk well, analytically, saying more than those 2 psychiatrists passing on the street. When the 2nd house is under heavy tension, usually seen by the ruler of the 2nd house under heavy tension, or a planet within it, you're dealing with a self-worth profile crisis. People don't feel worthwhile. They admit this easily, especially if, when you pursue it in a question, you're giving an indication with your voice that you can fix it or help fix it. You know, there's a self-worth anxiety profile here that doesn't stop. The client will say, oh boy, in spades, it's hot. You're right. It's too much. Had it all my life, that kind of stuff. You say, well, would you participate with me in just a little experiment? Now they want to do that, just as they want to do you a favor. And when I say that, and I'm almost forcing them to say yes, and of course they'll be delighted. Anything you stop talking about, their self-worth problem. You take your pad with lined paper and you say, tell me 5 things that are great about you. They can't do it. They have difficulty. The first one that they'll push out is, I'm a good listener. And so you write right next to it, too good? In other words, are you not saying anything to a conversation? They can't get a second or a third or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth. You can say things like, are you good in bed? This has shock value to it, but you're being very honest about it. And you're going to get an answer, like, needs to learn. And you're coming up with a little list here. And you're making up things so that your client can enjoy the potential of self-worth improvement. Now, this is a large item, and it's covered in Synthesis and Counseling in Astrology on pages 729 and 730. At the end of the consultation, you take that piece of paper, fold it up, and give it to your client. Because you will have written down 3 or 4 more things that they're really good at. How attractively dressed they are. Things like that. It'll make their hearts sing. And you're getting them to write down, objectively, things that are fine about them, about themselves. That's an interesting thing, if you think about it a little further. Rarely are we as important to others to have them think about us as negatively as we think they are. Rarely are we that important to other people that they think as negatively about us as we think they do. Think about that. People are not walking around wondering terrible things about us. They've got other things to worry about. Sure, you might be the victim of gossip and all of that, but it fades rather quickly. One of the nicest things you can suggest somebody does to get friends, to get relationships started, is to take a camera to a dinner party or something. Learn how to use it well, take a camera, and take pictures of people. People love to have you take their picture. If you take their picture, send them a copy of the print, and you'll be on their next guest list. Many people simply don't know how to put themselves forward. For instance, say somebody is going to get a job interview, but it's about the 165th one he has had. Something's wrong with the presentation. And so you say to him, look, pretend I'm the employer. Tell me how you present yourself. What do you say? And you get this absolutely dull, implicitly self-effacing presentation. You ask, did you ever explain to the potential employer why you want the job? No. Did you tell him you do want the job? No. And it goes on and on. Say, what if I did it this way? Now, I'd like a moment, sir, to tell you why I would like to work at this job. What did I do? I came forward. I spoke directly. I made it very clear. I did not use a symmetrical gesture. I got it all actively into the consciousness of the man interviewing me. Now, this is very helpful. Very, very helpful. Pride of self-assertion. Practice it. I want the job, let me tell you why. These are proven techniques. I didn't create these. These are well known at the very highest levels of job recruitment technique. Remember, everybody wants to be loved, and these same people very often can't give it. If you can't give love, how do you expect to get it? These people with the fixed Grand Cross of houses, 2, 5, 8, and 11, whose rulers or planets within them are under high developmental tension, are people who can't easily give a compliment because they think it diminishes them. And therefore, nobody hears anything nice from your client. When you point this out, you can say, you understand that. The person will say yes. And you say, well, why don't you find something nice to compliment every person you meet for? I compliment you for this or that. What a wonderful dress you have on. Hey, I really like that necktie. It's kind of daring to wear a necktie these days, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Well, thanks a lot. You know, you're setting up a relationship dynamic that frees you and reflects back on you excellently. I hope that's making sense. I have people walk into my office and they don't compliment me on my office. That tells me a lot. My office is beautiful. And I want them to tell me that. That's why it's beautiful. It's got 3,000 books in it. The colors are pretty. No. You've got to be able to have humor in suggesting that your client with a self-worth problem participate in the giving and receiving of compliments. I kid you not. It works wonders. It loosens them up. And then what you do is, as you're going along in further discussion, if you say something nice to them and there's silence, you say, you're supposed to say thank you. Oh yeah. And then when they do, their body will show that a relationship tie is forming. You with me? I hope so. Some Chinese sage somewhere sometime said, if you want to be happy, be happy. Now that's very simple. That's as simple as when you come to a fork in the road, take it. The second one is for indecision. Everybody will laugh at that because they know a decision must be made. The laughter takes the tension off it a little bit. Same thing with the first one. If you want to be happy, be happy. You're in control of your own life. And within all of this is a belief that people help other people make life better. It might not seem so, but that's really the bottom line. That's what society should be about. And when you know it and feel good about it, it doesn't hurt to meet somebody who doesn't understand it. And when you talk a little bit like this with your client starts to feel more comfortable. Believe me. Please understand that when we see a Mars factor in the 12th house, within 12, 13 degrees of the ascendant, we can expect hidden anger. And we got to find out what that was. A key to what it was is when it occurred, when it formed. By solar arc, that Mars is going to equal the ascendant at 12 or 13. Well, talk to your client. May I please suggest that there's some hidden anger here? Pause. If there's a reaction, go with it. If there isn't, say, and it seems focused around the age of 12 or 13. Please tell me about it. Well, this is when my parents decided in India to send my sister, older sister, to medical school when I have a photographic memory and I have already been memorizing the medical textbooks and they weren't paying me any regard at all. And now I'm the one who's the heart surgeon. I'm the one who has my clinic after my own name. And so take that. Actual case. Talk about hidden anger becoming a motivation. Talk about the explanation for the hidden anger forming. All of that was immediately given to me on a silver platter, just because I asked about it. Notice I'm not waiting for the planets to come and bang me on the head. I'm following their guidelines to open up the door. And then I try to think that I know something about life to be helpful. It's very interesting how our clients paying us a fee are actually endorsing the opportunity to tell us things. They want to talk. Sure, there are a few who have difficulty who don't expect the wrong thing or what have you. But remember, Newton had to go into the garden for the apple to drop. They have to participate to get the apple of knowledge to help them. For instance, Carl Rogers is a very famous psychiatrist, theorist. And he had such a device, it was so simple. In talking to a client, he would just repeat what the client said. For example, I wrote up a paragraph here that would sound Rogerian. Rogers would say, looks like we hit bottom in March 69, August 69, right in that period, huh? The client says, yes, it was terrible. My sister died of cancer, and I had a serious depression. Your sister died? Yes, you see, my sister was my child. Your child? Yes, I was her mother throughout her whole life. I was my mother's mother too, and mother to all my sisters. I was angry with God for having taken away this vital woman, the sister. See how that works? It's all coming from the client because you're interested and you're on target. Remember that every word was originally a song. Every word was originally a song. Listen to these words. Listen to them analytically. Put on your shelves 2 books a month about analysis, about understanding. Buy them in the self-help sections of your bookstores, a good one. Look for authors who are PhDs or MDs. In my book, The Creative Astrologer, in the bibliography you will see special books that are very helpful with what we've been discussing on this DVD. There are certain publishers that specialize in books of counseling. If you are very, very interested in something like parental relationships with the child, or sibling rivalries. You can find beautiful textbooks about how to manage that information. And I would suggest you learn them. I would suggest you parade the information before your client with pride. They will love learning something new about their situation, and they will gain some objective distance from it. Go forth and do this. It will enrich you as the astrologer. Thank you very, very much for meeting me on the sidewalk. What did he mean by that? You know more now. Thank you.